Nellwyn Dunley carried a black wolf pup into the Alpha King's breakfast room and asked whether he had misplaced a secret son. The pup wore half his royal cloak and held one of his socks between its teeth. Beta Oren went so pale that Nellwyn briefly wondered whether the baby belonged to him instead. That possibility seemed unfair to Oren, but the morning had already abandoned fairness. The breakfast room smelled of toasted rye, hot coffee, and the pine logs snapping in the grate. King Stellan Rathmere sat at the long table in a black coat. He looked as if sleep had insulted his ancestors. His dark hair remained perfectly combed, yet faint shadows bruised the skin beneath his golden eyes. Nellwyn had worked in his private wing for nearly 2 years. She knew his ordinary expressions. There was the look he used for late reports, the look reserved for dishonest merchants, and the colder look used when somebody spilled gravy on a border map. This was new. He stared at the pup as though it had crawled out of his ribs. The small creature stared back. Its glossy ears stood high above a round black face. One ear had a shallow notch near the tip. The sock hanging from its mouth bore the king's embroidered crown. Stellan set down his cup with great care. "I do not have a son," he told Nellwyn. She shifted the warm bundle against her chest. "That is useful information, Your Majesty. It is less useful than knowing why he owns your face." Oren made a strangled sound behind one fist. The 2 guards by the door examined the ceiling with professional desperation. The pup dropped the sock. Then it gave a tiny growl. Power rolled across the room. It was not the crushing force of an adult alpha. It felt more like a royal command delivered through a very small trumpet. Both guards lowered their heads before they could stop themselves. The spoons on the table trembled. Nellwyn's omega instincts suggested that she should kneel. Her practical instincts pointed out that kneeling while holding a squirming wolf was an excellent way to break her nose. Stellan's gaze snapped toward Oren. His beta had already noticed the golden eyes, the royal scent, and the old notch in the right ear. That mark matched the king's adult wolf. Only minutes earlier, Stellan had confessed that he could no longer feel his wolf inside him. Oren looked ready to request a quieter profession, such as cannon testing. The pup stretched both front paws toward the king. Stellan did not move. "He wants you," Nellwyn explained. "It is not a child." The king kept both hands on the table. "Then your wolf-shaped tax problem wants you." The left corner of Oren's mouth twitched. Stellan noticed, which cured it immediately. Nellwyn walked to the table. The pup leaned so far from her arms that its hind legs rose into the air. Stellan finally took it, holding the animal at a distance. For one hopeful second, the pup studied his face with tender wonder. Then it bit his chin. The guards inhaled together. Oren closed his eyes. Nellwyn rescued the royal beard by pressing 2 fingers gently behind the pup's jaw. "Do not chew the government," she advised it. "People are arriving to use him." The pup released Stellan and sneezed. At the same instant, the king sneezed too. Silence settled over the room. Even the fire seemed embarrassed. Stellan's face became completely still. Nellwyn had learned that his stillness usually meant several dangerous thoughts were fighting behind it. The pup licked the spot it had bitten. A faint flush touched the king's ears, although the animal had licked his chin rather than theirs. Oren stepped closer. He kept his voice low and calm. "Your Majesty, we should clear the room." Stellan glanced at the guards. "You saw nothing unusual." One guard looked at the royal sock on the carpet. "Nothing at all, sire. Especially not the sock," Nellwyn added. The men fled with impressive discipline. Outside, carriage wheels rattled through the front court. The first delegations for the Winter Accord Summit had arrived. 5 allied territories would join the royal domain for 7 days of talks. They would discuss patrols, food roads, and storm relief. On the final full moon, their leaders would renew the agreement with the traditional moon run. Stellan had spent 6 weeks preparing for it. He had slept 3 hours on most nights and none on several others. The summit could not be delayed because his missing wolf had developed teeth. Oren lifted the discarded sock between 2 fingers. "I recommend canceling the morning reception." Denied, Stellan replied. The pup yawned in his arms. The king yawned too, then looked personally betrayed by his own mouth. Nellwyn folded the trailing cloak around the animal. She noticed Stellan's hands were cold enough to whiten at the knuckles. Cancel 1 hour, she suggested. If the kingdom collapses before breakfast, the summit was poorly designed. His golden eyes settled on her. They had met dozens of times during her 18 months of service there. He had once helped her lift a fallen coal bucket when nobody else was present. She had once corrected a guest list before he seated 2 feuding widows together. Their acquaintance had always lived in small, quiet moments. This was the first time she had accused him of possibly losing a son. His gaze dropped to the black pup. It had placed one forepaw over his wrist as if checking his pulse. 1 hour, he decided. Oren, lock the outer doors. Nellwyn, explain exactly where you found this creature. The pup retrieved the sock and settled against his chest. Nellwyn took a breath. It began with your laundry making a noise no respectable laundry should make. Before sunrise, Nellwyn had entered the royal rooms carrying kindling, hot water, and the conviction that nothing interesting should happen before tea. The king's bedchamber was empty. Stellan had already moved to his private office, where he planned to insult his health with more work. A low fire glowed behind the grate. Frost silvered the windows, and the air held familiar traces of cedar soap, wool, and the king's winter scent. Nellwyn opened the curtains, collected a shirt from a chair, and replaced 2 unused blankets. Her cart stood beside the service door. It contained fresh sheets destined for the guest wing, and a stack of towels warm from the laundry room. The towels began to snore. Nellwyn stared at them. The sound came again, soft and rumbling. She lifted the top towel and found a black nose resting on the king's folded cloak. The pup had arranged the expensive garment into a nest. One royal sock covered its head like an execution hood. It opened golden eyes. Nellwyn considered screaming. The pup considered her. Both decided against unnecessary drama. You are either lost, she murmured, or the laundry has started breeding. The pup pushed the sock off one ear and yawned. She checked the windows. They were latched. The main doors had been guarded all night, and the service passage was too narrow for an adult wolf to use unnoticed. No mother scent clung to the cart. Small damp prints crossed the floor from beside Stellan's bed. They ended at the wheel of the laundry cart. Nellwyn remembered moving that cart before the first bell. It had stood inside the bedchamber during the dark hour before dawn. She had pushed it through 3 service corridors while delivering towels. Whatever slept inside had been carried far from the royal rooms before sunrise. She tried to lift the pup. It tightened 4 paws around the cloak. That belongs to the king. The animal showed one tiny canine. I agree that he owns too many cloaks. This remains theft. She fetched a strip of breakfast sausage. The pup released the cloak, swallowed the meat, and grabbed the fabric again before she could move it. The maneuver possessed the smooth dishonesty of an experienced minister. Nellwyn wrapped cloak, pup, and 1 sock into a manageable bundle. Before approaching the king, she checked the night ledger. No visiting family had reported a missing cub. She quietly asked the duty captain whether a royal animal had entered the private wing. He said no and did not see what she carried beneath the folded cloth. She did not parade the pup through the nursery, kennels, and kitchens. A palace could turn 1 question into 6 engagements and a treason charge before lunch. That restraint had bought them perhaps 20 minutes. Now, in the locked breakfast room, Oren crouched beside the faint trail of prints Nellwyn had described. The pup sat on the table and licked butter from Stellan's plate. Each lick made the king's expression more offended. The tracks began at the bed? Oren asked. Beside it, Nellwyn confirmed. Nothing entered through the doors or windows. Stellan stood near the fire. Without his wolf, he looked almost normal to an ordinary observer. Nellwyn saw the difference because she had watched him cross these rooms for 2 years. His movements had lost their silent certainty. He rubbed one hand over the opposite wrist, seeking warmth. Oren explained the problem without ceremony. Stellan had awakened before dawn, feeling hollow. He could not hear his wolf, catch distant scents, or summon the beginning of a shift. The king had assumed exhaustion was interfering. Then Nellwyn arrived carrying a possible royal infant. The pup sneezed butter onto a border report. That document survived 3 revisions, Stellan observed. Nellwyn wiped the page. It should survive breakfast. Oren examined the notch in the pup's ear without touching it. Stellan's adult wolf had gained the same mark at 13, after squeezing beneath a broken training fence. The scar belonged to the wolf shape, not the human ear. No child could inherit an identical injury. I believe this is your wolf, Oren told the king. The king eyed the creature stealing his butter. My wolf is 9 feet from nose to tail. The pup slipped on the plate and landed in the jam. At present, Nellwyn replied, he is 9 inches from dignity to disaster. The king gave her a long look. She lowered her eyes, though not before seeing the briefest spark of amusement beneath his alarm. For most of her employment, she had known him as a collection of controlled details. His boots always faced the door. His reports were stacked square. He thanked servants by name when no noble audience was nearby. Once, he had quietly replaced a maid's wages after a visiting lord blamed her for his own broken cup. Those details had made him difficult to dismiss as merely cold. They had not prepared her to see his softer instincts sitting in jam. Oren suggested a harmless test. Nellwyn cleaned the pup's paws, then scratched gently behind its notched ear. The small body sagged with pleasure. Across the room, Stellan's shoulders dropped. His eyelids lowered before he caught himself. Nellwyn stopped. Both king and pup looked disappointed. That was more convincing than the shared sneeze. Outside, a trumpet announced Lady Yusabit Caldermere's arrival. A second carriage rolled beneath the arch. Time tightened around the room. Stellan straightened, although color had not returned to his hands. We confirm the connection, he decided. Then we tell the summit only what it must know. The pup planted a jam print on the summit schedule. Oren studied the mark over Stellan's name. It appears your wolf has already submitted its report. Stellan attempted to question the pup before trying to reunite with it. This was unnecessary, but Nellwyn understood the impulse. A king could hardly arrest his own missing instincts. Interrogation was the next most respectable option. They moved into a small sitting room adjoining the bedchamber. The place smelled of old leather and cedar smoke. Oren closed the curtains while Nellwyn placed the pup on a rug. Stellan sat opposite it. Where did you come from? The pup licked jam from its paw. Why did you leave? It rolled onto its back. Can it understand me? Nellwyn watched the exposed round belly. It understands that you are wasting excellent rubbing time. Stellan declined to rub himself. Oren placed a clean summit list on the floor and set the pup beside it. The little wolf stepped across the names, paused, and pressed one sticky paw directly over Stellan Rathmere. Nellwyn folded her arms. That seems conclusive. It may be random, Stellan replied. The pup took a piece of bacon, carried it to the list, and ate while sitting on his name. Oren made a note. Repeated result. The king glared at both of them. More tests followed. None involved pain. Oren compared scent, pulse, reflex, and reaction to familiar objects. The pup knew Stellan's private whistle. It growled at a ceremonial hat the king disliked. When it devoured too much bacon, Stellan produced a sudden hiccup that interrupted an order. The pup hiccuped 1 second later. Nellwyn pressed her lips together. She had survived noble tantrums, burst pipes, and a visiting duchess who traveled with 14 decorative pillows. She had never worked harder not to laugh. You may laugh, Stellan said grimly. I value my position. Stellan studied her trembling mouth. Your face has already resigned. Her laughter escaped. It was not elegant. The pup bounced toward her, delighted by the sound. Stellan watched it place both paws on her skirt. Something unreadable moved through his eyes. It was not anger. It looked closer to envy, although envying one's detached soul seemed inconvenient even by royal standards. Oren proposed the final test. Stellan would sleep while Nellwyn guided the pup close enough to touch him. The king objected that he could not sleep on command. His body answered with another yawn. They removed his coat and settled him on the narrow couch. He looked uncomfortable without a desk between himself and everyone else. Nellwyn pulled a blanket across him. Her fingers brushed his wrist, and she felt how cold his skin remained. For a moment, his gaze held hers. There had been small moments before this one. He had noticed her limping after a 12-hour shift and changed the private wing schedule the next week. She had left hot tea outside his office during the winter fever, pretending it was standard service. Neither had mentioned these things afterward. Their silence had always been safer than curiosity. Now his missing wolf was chewing her apron string. He let his eyelids fall. Exhaustion dragged him under within minutes. The pup stopped playing. It climbed onto the couch, sniffed the king's face, and placed one paw over his heart. Black shadows spread beneath its toes. The small body softened into smoke without vanishing violently. Fur, paws, and golden eyes folded into the dark outline beneath Stellan's ribs. The room became still. Stellan drew a deep breath. Warmth returned slowly to his face. When he woke, his eyes flashed brighter than before. He could feel his wolf again. The certainty did not require another expert. The inner circle now knew exactly what the pup was. What remained unknown was why the separation had happened and how to stop it happening again. Stellan sat up. His first expression was relief. His second was embarrassment. "I remember soap," he murmured. Nellwyn glanced at the laundry scent on her sleeves. He continued reluctantly. "Warm cloth. Bacon. Someone laughing." "A traumatic morning," she agreed. His mouth nearly curved. Oren opened the curtains. Sunlight had reached the frosted roofs. In the front court, servants unloaded trunks while foreign guards displayed 5 different opinions about where horses belonged. The summit waited. Stellan stood and tested his senses. He could smell coffee in the breakfast room and snow on Oren's boots. When he tried to summon his adult shape, black fur flickered across one wrist, then vanished. The wolf was present, but unstable. "We tell the delegates there is no child," he decided. "The animal was a temporary manifestation connected to my health. It has no separate identity or inheritance rights." Oren nodded. That answer was honest without inviting the entire court into the royal bedchamber. Nellwyn gathered the stained papers. "What happens when you sleep again?" All 3 looked toward the couch. Stellan's wolf gave a small, distant thump inside his chest. The sensation made him frown. "We find out," he replied. An hour later, they found out. The king fell asleep for 6 minutes while Oren read a patrol report. A black nose appeared from the shadow beneath his collar. 2 paws followed. The pup dropped onto the rug, shook itself, and ran straight past Oren. It headed for the service passage where Nellwyn had disappeared with the laundry. The pup found Nellwyn beside a cupboard containing 47 folded napkins and no reasonable place for a royal crisis. It burst through the half-open service door, skidded on the stone, and collided with her ankles. She caught the shelf before the napkins could become witnesses. "You again." The pup wagged its tail. Behind it came Oren, moving with the controlled speed of a man whose duties had recently expanded beyond language. Stellan followed more slowly. Without his wolf, cold had returned to his face. "It left as soon as I slept," he explained. Nellwyn lifted the pup. The king watched it settle beneath her chin with a displeasure too personal for a medical concern. "Perhaps it likes laundry," he observed. "Perhaps laundry holds it without looking insulted." Oren stepped between them before the ruler of the North began a formal dispute with his own chest. He suggested they return to the secure rooms. A boy stood at the end of the passage. Kit Caldermere was 10 years old, narrow as a broom handle, and dressed in the green of the Eastern delegation. A ceremonial ribbon hung from one shoulder. His eyes widened at the black bundle in Nellwyn's arms. "Is that the prince?" Oren's soul appeared to leave his body without becoming anything cute. Nellwyn shifted in front of the pup. "There is no prince." Kit sniffed the air with the confidence of a child who had recently learned that adults could be wrong. "It smells like the king." Stellan arrived behind Orin. The boy bowed so quickly that his ribbon swung over his face. The pup wriggled down, trotted to Kit, and sat on his boot. The young visitor stared at its golden eyes and notched ear. Stellan used the tone that had ended border arguments. "You will not repeat what you saw." Kit nodded solemnly. The pup tugged his ribbon free. "May I touch its ears first?" the boy asked. Stellan looked offended by the negotiation. Nellwyn understood it perfectly. She allowed one careful touch. The pup leaned into Kit's hand, then fled with the green ribbon streaming from its mouth. The promise lasted until lunch. Kit did not deliberately betray them. He merely asked his grandmother why secret princes had sharper teeth than ordinary ones. Unfortunately, he asked while Lady Ysabet Caldermere stood beside two envoys and an open door. By the time the soup arrived, the Western delegation had heard that Stellan possessed twins. By the fish course, one twin had a foreign mother. Before dessert, both imaginary children had been engaged. Nellwyn learned this while standing near the dining hall with the pup hidden in a deep basket. It had accepted concealment only after she lined the basket with one of her work shawls. Every few minutes, a black ear rose between the folded edges. The hall smelled of roasted venison, beeswax, wet wool, and too many important wolves pretending not to sniff for a baby. Stellan sat at the high table. He wore his authority like armor, although Nellwyn could now see the strain beneath it. His wolf had been outside his body for 2 hours. His fingers remained wrapped around a warm cup. Lady Ysabet watched him from the eastern side. Her gray-streaked hair was braided beneath a plain gold circlet. She did not look eager for scandal. She looked eager for accurate information. Alpha Caldus Rathmere looked eager for both. At the end of the meal, Stellan rose. Conversation stopped. He stated that no royal child existed. A temporary manifestation connected to his wolf had appeared that morning. It was receiving private care, possessed no independent title, and would not enter the line of succession. The explanation was honest. It was also strange enough to feed the room for days. Caldus asked whether the king remained capable of taking adult wolf form. Stellan did not lie. That is being assessed. Unease moved through the hall like a cold draft. The Winter Accord did not require a perfect king. It did require every territory to know who would command joint patrols during a succession crisis. If Stellan had a child, that duty might pass through his line. If he had none, the territories would select a temporary protector. A hidden heir would change their promises. An unstable alpha would change their confidence. Lady Ysabet raised one hand before Caldus could press further. She said the council would discuss the matter formally on the third day. Until then, the king deserved time to obtain facts. That mercy came with a deadline. The summit's final night was the full moon. If Stellan still could not unite with his adult wolf, the separation might settle into a lasting pattern. He could face months or years without a stable shift. Nellwyn felt the pup move inside the basket. It emerged during the silence with Kit's green ribbon around its neck. Then it climbed into her lap, put its chin on her arm, and sighed. Every wolf in the hall smelled the royal scent. Stellan closed his eyes for one brief second. Orin appeared at Nellwyn's shoulder carrying a writing board. "The king requires a temporary wolf attendant." "Does the position include danger pay?" she whispered. "It includes whatever prevents another engagement before supper." Across the room, Stellan opened his eyes and looked directly at her. The stern mask remained, but she saw gratitude beneath it. She also saw the unmistakable irritation caused by his wolf resting happily against her chest. Nellwyn scratched the pup behind its damaged ear. The king's shoulders relaxed at the high table. She smiled before she could stop herself. His eyes narrowed. The summit had 6 days remaining. Nellwyn suspected the Northern Alliance might survive. She was less certain about the Alpha King's dignity. Orin drafted the first royal wolf attendant agreement before the dining hall had emptied. He used a side table normally reserved for wine. Nellwyn stood opposite him with the pup tucked beneath one arm. Stellan remained nearby because the animal's distance made him colder, though he insisted that was his only reason. The agreement began badly. It described Nellwyn's service as an additional honor. She crossed out honor and wrote paid duty. Oren accepted the correction without argument. Stellan raised one eyebrow. The royal household provides your wages, he reminded her. The royal household also provides your wolf, Nellwyn replied. Neither should be expected to work without supper. The pup barked once. Stellan produced a tiny hiccup. Oren wrote faster. Nellwyn required extra meat to come from the royal kitchens, not the servant's allowance. Another maid would cover her ordinary corridor duties. Anything chewed, buried, or decorated with royal saliva would be replaced. She also demanded the right to stop if the work became unsafe. Stellan read that line twice. Granted. He did not bargain, threaten, or remind her that she was an Omega. His quick agreement mattered more than she wanted it to. Throughout her palace service, she had watched nobles turn requests into commands by lowering their voices. Stellan possessed enough power to do that without effort. Instead, he moved the writing board toward her so she could add another condition. No one calls this a voluntary feminine duty, she said. Oren's pen paused. I would not dare. The pup stepped onto the document. Its paw left a damp print beneath Stellan's signature. Then it tried to eat the corner. The second party accepts, Nellwyn concluded. The agreement gave her access to restricted service routes, the small council antechamber, and a secure room beside Stellan's office. That solved the practical problem. It created several social ones. By mid-afternoon, 3 senior maids believed Nellwyn had been promoted. 2 believed she had been punished. 1 asked whether she had secretly given birth during breakfast. Nellwyn answered that any child born during her shift would be entered on the overtime sheet. Nellwyn returned to the servants' hall and reassigned her unfinished duties instead of leaving them for exhausted coworkers. The revised rota exposed several unpaid extensions in the royal rooms. She marked them for later, remembering the leadership posts she had wanted long before the wolf appeared. Stellan approved the replacement hours and ordered them paid. The quiet decision joined the reasons she had noticed him before the summit. The pup spent the afternoon testing its new room. It rejected a padded basket, accepted an empty coal scuttle, and moved every blanket onto the floor. When Stellan entered to check on it, the creature remained against Nellwyn's boots. It appears comfortable, the king said. His voice suggested comfort was an act of disloyalty. Nellwyn lifted the pup. It immediately pressed its nose beneath her chin. Warmth spread across Stellan's ears. You feel that, don't you? She asked. I feel many things. Most are inconvenient. Nellwyn adjusted the pup beneath her chin. Jealousy seems especially inconvenient when the rival is your own soul. Stellan looked toward Oren. The beta remained focused on his papers. I am not present. The king approached. He offered one hand to the pup, which sniffed his fingers and then turned its face away. Nellwyn tried not to enjoy this. She failed a little. Perhaps you should ask nicely, she suggested. It belongs to me. The pup tucked its head beneath her chin. Stellan exhaled through his nose. Would you come here? One black ear rotated toward him. After a dramatic pause, the pup climbed into his arms. The king looked absurdly satisfied. Nellwyn understood then that the arrangement would involve caring for 2 stubborn creatures. Only one could be carried in a coal scuttle, and she had not completely ruled out the king. The first diplomatic gift arrived before dawn on the summit's second day. It was a carved wooden crown sized for a wolf pup. The second gift was a tiny green cloak. The third was a set of leather boots that no sensible wolf would wear. Oren arranged them on a table with the expression of a man cataloging evidence after a very cheerful crime. The North Coast envoy sent a ceremonial betrothal ribbon, he reported. It is intended for use when the alleged prince becomes an adult. Stellan stared at the pewter-edged box. Return it. Already done. Nellwyn entered with the pup and found both men examining a miniature suit of armor. The animal wriggled free, ran beneath the table, and emerged wearing one leather boot on its head. Stellan pointed at it. "This is why monarchies fail. Because their wolves dislike hats?" Nellwyn asked. "Because people send armor before confirming the existence of a person." The room smelled of wool, fresh wood, and the orange peel burning in the grate. A cold draft slipped beneath the window. Nellwyn rubbed her forearms. The pup noticed. It climbed onto the gift table, ignored a pile of meat treats, and pulled down a soft red scarf. The cloth was nearly twice its length. It dragged the scarf to Nellwyn and placed one end on her boot. She bent to pick it up. "Thank you," Stellan watched with narrowed eyes. "It responded to temperature." The pup returned to the table. It passed the meat again, selected a second scarf, and dropped that one into Nellwyn's hands, too. Oren coughed into his fist. "A repeated response," Nellwyn observed. The king had used those exact words during the previous day's tests. He recognized the theft and disliked it. Rosewind Pike entered before he could answer. The young southern envoy wore a blue riding coat and an amused expression. Rumor had long paired her name with Stellan's because unmarried rulers apparently created unbearable silence. She took in Nellwyn's scarves, the boot-headed pup, and the king's face. "Should I return later?" Rosewind asked, "after His Majesty finishes losing a romantic contest against himself?" Stellan removed the boot from the pup. "There is no contest." The animal carried another scarf to Nellwyn. Rosewind nodded. "Then the defeat is unconditional." She had come to discuss a blocked southern grain road. The matter gave Stellan a welcome escape. Yet while Oren opened the maps, the pup climbed into Nellwyn's lap and rested its chin on her knee. His attention moved to the map, then to the pup, then back to the map. Rosewind noticed every movement. Nellwyn did too. Her amusement softened around an unexpected warmth. The wolf's attention came from Stellan, even if he denied it. The king had noticed her cold before she voiced it. His least guarded half had responded without calculation. She wrapped one scarf around her shoulders and returned the others. "One is enough," she told the pup. Stellan's gaze lingered on the red wool. "Keep it. As wages? As proof that my wolf can complete one useful diplomatic exchange." Nellwyn ran the scarf through her fingers. "Your wolf gave away someone else's gift. Then it has mastered diplomacy completely." Rosewind laughed. Stellan's mouth finally curved. It was a small smile gone within seconds. Nellwyn had seen it only twice before. Both times no nobles had been watching. This time, 3 people and a very smug wolf saw everything. The pup attended its first treaty meeting inside a basket behind a curtain. That solution had sounded dignified when Oren proposed it. It became less dignified after the basket began moving by itself. Nellwyn sat on a stool in the narrow space between curtain and wall. Through a gap, she could see the long council table. Wax, damp coats, and strong tea scented the room. Rain tapped the windows while the royal domain and 5 allies discussed winter grain. Stellan sat at the head. His wolf had separated during a required rest before the meeting. He looked pale but focused. Alpha Caldus presented the Western Storage Report. His broad hand covered several numbers as he spoke. He claimed his territory held enough grain for 4 severe months. The pup's nose appeared above the basket. Caldus continued. The pup made a doubtful huff. Everyone heard it. Nellwyn lowered the black head. "No commentary." Caldus's scent sharpened with irritation and worry. The pup pushed up again and produced a longer huff. Lady Isabet turned toward the curtain. "Does the manifestation object to his figures?" "It objects to baskets," Stellan replied. The pup sneezed precisely when Caldus repeated the number. Silence expanded. Caldus glared at the curtain. His heartbeat had quickened, and every wolf in the chamber could smell his tension. He finally admitted that 2 Western storehouses had suffered water damage. The real supply might last 3 months, not 4. The admission changed the patrol plan. Southern wagons would need to travel west before the first heavy snow. Several delegates began watching the basket with reverence. Stellan stopped that immediately. He explained that the pup was not a prophet or a living truth spell. It had smelled Caldus's unease and reacted like an animal. It cannot judge policy, the king added. The pup huffed at him. Nellwyn covered its nose with one hand. Her shoulders shook. Stellan had just proposed extending the meeting through lunch. Lady Ysabet examined his untouched tea and the cold color around his mouth. Perhaps it objects to policy after all. The council took a meal break. In the antechamber, Nellwyn gave the pup a small bowl. Stellan entered and closed the door behind him. You encouraged it, he accused. I attempted to silence it with my hand. The king glanced at her unsuccessful smile. You laughed. That was private support. The pup ate too fast. Stellan hiccuped, and Nellwyn handed him water before offering the same to the animal. He accepted the cup. You enjoy this. Only the parts where the most feared wolf in the north is defeated by digestion. His eyes warmed despite himself. Nellwyn sobered. The room's small stove did not stop him shivering. She could see his control thinning at the edges. You need to sleep after the meeting. There are 4 reports left. Nellwyn nodded toward his pale hands. There will still be 4 after you faint. They may become easier if you land on one. He looked prepared to refuse. The pup left its bowl, crossed the rug, and placed both paws on his boot. Stellan stared down at it. Then he looked at Nellwyn. You have formed an alliance. It offered better terms than the Western Territory. The meeting resumed after lunch. It ended on time. Stellan's afternoon sleep became an official summit item. He objected to the wording, so Oren changed the schedule to private restoration period. Nellwyn thought that sounded like furniture repair. Stellan disliked her alternative even more. She had suggested the king lies down before he falls down. His office smelled of ink and the bitter coffee he kept drinking instead of resting. Reports covered the desk in tidy towers. The order concealed how many times he had read the same page. Nellwyn placed 4 objects before him. The first was a letter he had signed twice. The second was a guest list that seated Lady Ysabet beside a lord she had sued. The third was a patrol order dated for the previous year. The fourth was a salt cellar. Oren pointed to it. His Majesty tried to stamp a document with this. Stellan looked between them. The shapes are similar. One contains salt, Nellwyn said. The document needed improvement. The pup sat beneath the desk with a leather ball between its paws. It had been returned after the morning meeting, then emerged again when Stellan dozed over a report. Each separation seemed easier. Each left him weaker. Lady Ysabet had asked to see him at 4. Caldus wanted another storage session. The kitchens required approval for tomorrow's feast. Stellan reached for the next paper. Nellwyn put her hand on it first. The gesture violated several layers of etiquette. His gaze moved from her fingers to her face. You hired me to keep your wolf alive, she reminded him. At present, that requires keeping you functional. Delegation may look like incapacity, Oren answered before she could. Reading the same paragraph 6 times looks worse. The truth struck harder because the Beta spoke without humor. Stellan had grown beneath a father who treated rest as public surrender. At 14, he had been forced to attend training with a fever. At 19, he had learned to sleep sitting up so nobody could accuse him of comfort. He had spent his reign proving that he needed less than other men. Now, his denied needs had pause. The pup rolled the ball against his boot. Stellan went quiet. After a pause, he handed the grain session to Oren and the kitchen decision to the household cook. He asked Ysabet to meet an hour later. Then he lay on the office couch. Nellwyn drew the curtains. The air softened into quiet. When his breathing deepened, she lifted the pup beside him. It rested one paw over his heart and melted into shadow. Stellan slept for a full hour. He woke warmer. His senses returned sharply enough that he smelled snow gathering beyond the walls. He shifted one hand and black fur covered it to the wrist before receding. That was more progress than he had made all morning. Lady Ysabet arrived as Nellwyn opened the curtains. She took in the blanket, the cleared desk, and the improved color in Stellan's face. Oren chaired the grain meeting, Stellan told her, braced for judgment. Isabet removed her gloves. Good. A king who cannot use a beta has selected the wrong beta. Oren looked almost emotional. It might only have been exhaustion. The older woman added that the revised Western plan was better than the original. No one had mistaken Stellan's sleep for abdication. After she left, the king remained quiet. Nellwyn collected the coffee tray. Your throne survived an hour without you. A disturbing precedent. Tomorrow we may allow the curtains to make decisions. He rose and took the tray from her hands before she could object. The simple courtesy surprised her. Tomorrow, he said, you may remind me once. Only once? Stellan handed the empty cup to her. Oren may remind me the other 12 times. The beta sighed. Nellwyn laughed, and Stellan carried the tray to the door with the smallest hint of a smile. On the summit's third morning, Lady Isabet requested a formal statement about succession. She made the request in a private council, not before the gossiping court. Caldus attended for the west, Rosewen for the south, and 2 quieter delegates represented the coast and high forest. The pup slept on Nellwyn's feet beneath the table. Isabet explained the problem plainly. If Stellan died without an heir, the 5 territories would select a temporary winter commander. If an acknowledged heir existed, that duty would remain with the royal line. Nobody was planning the king's funeral. They were planning an agreement meant to outlive everyone present. Stellan could not ask them to sign around a rumor. He rose. His answer carried no comforting decoration. There was no royal child. The black pup was a temporary physical expression of his own wolf. It had no separate life, title, mother, or inheritance claim. His healers were assessing why the separation had begun and whether it threatened his adult shift. The room remained silent for several breaths. Caldus finally looked under the table. Your wolf is chewing my boot. Nellwyn leaned down. That is not a political statement. It feels political. She traded the leather lace for a piece of dried apple. The pup accepted this settlement with more grace than several landowners she knew. Isabet asked whether the king would complete the moon run on the 7th night. Stellan answered that he intended to try, but he would not lie about certainty. The older Alpha accepted that. Caldus did not look satisfied, yet he stopped speaking as though a hidden prince existed. Outside the room, accuracy became less successful. By noon, the court believed Stellan had stored his adult wolf somewhere. By afternoon, somebody claimed Nellwyn kept it in the laundry. A kitchen boy asked whether wolves required starch. Rumor has no legs, Nellwyn complained while carrying folded towels, yet it continues to outrun everyone in this palace. Stellan walked beside her because the pup had followed the towels. He had no sensible reason to help deliver them, so he called it a security inspection. How would you describe the situation? He asked. She considered the pup trotting between them. Your least manageable habits grew ears. That is not medically precise. It is emotionally flawless. The pup bumped its shoulder against her ankle. Stellan watched the contact. Which habits? Stealing cloth, ignoring instructions, demanding attention while pretending not to need it. His gaze moved to her face. I have never stolen cloth. Then your wolf is developing independently. We should warn the council. For several steps, only their boots and small paws sounded against the stone. The western windows held a white afternoon sky. Steam and lavender drifted from the laundry stairwell. Stellan had walked these passages beside her before, always surrounded by distance. Now his sleeve brushed hers when they turned a corner. Neither moved away quickly. The pup noticed. Its tail struck both their legs. One more habit, Nellwyn said. Which one? The pup walked between their boots. Interfering. He regarded his wolf. That may be inherited from my attendant. It was the first time he had teased her without hiding behind an order. Warmth rose along her neck. The pup looked delighted with both of them. Cedron Vale arrived from the old royal wolf yards after lunch. He was 70, broad through the shoulders, and unimpressed by crowns. He had cared for royal children before Stellan's father closed the old yards. He remembered Stellan as a solemn boy who hid wooden balls beneath his mattress because play had been forbidden after lessons. Stellan did not enjoy this history being shared. "I was 6, he said. Cedron examined the pup. "You were difficult at 6, too." They met in the private training room. Sunlight lay across the worn floorboards, carrying the smells of dust, leather, and cold iron fixtures. No silver was present. Cedron watched Stellan fall asleep for a short, supervised rest. The pup emerged as a soft black shape, stretched, and went directly to Nellwyn. The old keeper checked its eyes, scent, and response to the king's voice. He did not announce an obscure curse. He asked about sleep, recent shifts, childhood training, and the first night of complete separation. Each answer uncovered another part of an old pattern. Stellan had shifted young, but his father approved only the useful parts of wolfhood. Running built strength, tracking sharpened skill, guarding taught duty. Play served no purpose and was therefore removed. At 7, Stellan had chased a yellow leaf across the training yard. The king made him stand beside the wall until dark. At 9, he had crawled into his nurse's room after a nightmare. The nurse was dismissed before breakfast. At 12, he learned to swallow a pleased rumble before anyone heard it. His adult wolf had still grown powerful. It could fight, hunt, command, and endure cold. Those abilities were welcomed, so they developed. The instincts that sought warmth and uncomplicated affection remained buried beneath them. Cedron did not blame every present difficulty on childhood. Plenty of sternly raised wolves remained whole. The immediate trigger was the brutal summit schedule. Stellan had reduced meals, abandoned rest, and resisted partial shifts whenever work interrupted them. Exhaustion had cracked the control holding two unequal halves together. The wolf emerged as a pup because that shape carried the unfinished needs. It went to Nellwyn because her scent had become associated with warmth, clean cloth, regular food, and honesty. During 2 years in the private wing, she had entered without fear, completed what she promised, and never punished weakness she happened to witness. None of that made her a magical cure. Another trusted person might have offered safety. Stellan's existing attention toward her had simply made his wolf's choice immediate and stubborn. Nellwyn was relieved by the distinction. She wanted his affection to become a human decision, not a symptom she was required to obey. The answer was painfully ordinary. 6 weeks of exhaustion had weakened Stellan's control. Decades of treating normal wolf needs as shameful had shaped what escaped. His wolf had not become a baby. It had chosen the last form in which it remembered wanting comfort openly. The full moon would arrive on the final summit night. If the pattern continued through that strong shift cycle, the juvenile form could become settled. Recovery might then require months or years. "Can it be forced back?" Stellan asked. Cedron's expression hardened. "That question caused this." Nellwyn looked away before the king caught her agreement. The old keeper prescribed sleep, regular meals, and short waking exercises. Stellan would call his wolf without demanding an adult shape. He would allow harmless impulses instead of crushing them. That included play. Stellan received this news as if ordered to invade himself. Cedron placed a worn leather ball on the floor. The pup froze. Its ears rose. Stellan's right foot moved half an inch. Nellwyn saw it. Oren saw it. Cedron had expected it. The king slowly returned his foot to its place. No. The pup launched itself at the ball. It rolled beneath a bench. The animal slid after it, rear paws scrambling. Dust burst into the air. Stellan coughed and looked offended by the joy radiating through their connection. "This is treatment?" he asked. "This is Tuesday," Cedron replied. "Treatment begins when you stop fighting Tuesday." Nellwyn laughed into her hand. Stellan looked at her. Embarrassment tightened his face, but he did not leave. He knelt, reached beneath the bench, and rolled the ball back. The pup chased it again. Something softened in the room. The king's shoulders remained tense, yet his eyes followed the animal with a hunger deeper than amusement. He was watching a childhood he had never been allowed to finish. Nellwyn no longer wanted to laugh at that part. Cedron gave one final warning. A successful adult shift on the seventh night would be progress, not a magical cure. Stellan would need to keep sleeping, sharing work, and practicing long afterward. "And if I refuse?" Stellan asked. The pup returned the ball to Nellwyn instead of him. Cedron nodded toward it. "You already know what your wolf thinks of that." Stellan's first waking exercise produced 2 ears and a constitutional crisis. He stood in the training room with his eyes closed. Cedron instructed him to invite his wolf forward without selecting its form. Nellwyn held the leather ball. Oren guarded the door against anyone who might enter and discover the monarchy had become unusually fluffy. Shadow gathered around Stellan's boots. Black ears appeared through his hair. They were triangular, expressive, and far too large for his human head. Nellwyn bit the inside of her cheek. Oren turned toward a wall map. His shoulders shook once. Stellan opened his eyes. What happened? The ears flattened. That destroyed Nellwyn's control. Her laugh rang through the room. One ear turned toward her while the other remained pinned. The king reached up, felt fur, and closed his eyes again. "I have led armies," he said. Cedron remained calm. "Today you have ears. Continue." Stellan could have forced them away. Nellwyn saw the old reflex in his clenched jaw. Instead, he breathed until the shadow widened. The pup stepped out beside him. This manifestation differed from the sleeping separations. A dark ribbon connected its paws to Stellan's shadow. He remained warm and alert. When the pup looked at Nellwyn, he saw her too. Cedron explained that this was a conscious connection, not an escape. If Stellan learned to accept it, he might eventually call a fully separated wolf home while awake. For now, either could end the exercise by returning through the shadow. Nellwyn rolled the ball. The pup ran. Stellan stepped after it before catching himself. She rolled it again. This time, the pup and the king moved together. Stellan retrieved the ball from the wall and held it with grave dignity. "Now what? Bring it back," Nellwyn told him. He looked from her to the ball. "You threw it. That is how the game works." He crossed the floor and placed it in her palm. The pup sat beside his boot, tail sweeping dust. "Good boy," she said. Stellan went still. Oren abandoned the map and covered his mouth. Nellwyn's face heated. "I meant the wolf. Naturally." The pup leaned against her skirt. Its connected shadow tugged gently at Stellan's feet. He could feel every stroke when she touched its head. This time, he remembered the sight as well as the sensation. His expression changed. Surprise came first, followed by a tenderness he did not hide quickly enough. Nellwyn's humor softened. "Ready to bring him back?" she asked. Stellan nodded. He did not command the pup. He extended one hand. The little wolf crossed to him, touched its nose to his palm, and dissolved along the ribbon of shadow. The ears remained for one unfortunate second after the rest vanished. Nellwyn smiled. "Your Majesty, you missed something." He felt his hair. "No one leaves this room." Oren pulled the door open. "I have forgotten the entire afternoon." Stellan left with his dignity mostly intact. Nellwyn followed carrying the ball, which the king quietly took from her and placed in his own pocket. That evening, Nellwyn found the pup beneath the summit table with a spoon in its mouth. Stellan had fallen asleep in his secure room after dinner. The wolf had slipped through an unlatched inner door and followed her scent to the empty hall. Rows of polished spoons reflected candlelight. Fresh rushes covered the floor. Beeswax, pine, and tomorrow's bread drifted through the quiet building. Nellwyn sat on the carpet and traded the spoon for the leather ball. "Your human half is impossible," she informed the pup. It placed the ball in her lap. "He thinks every problem can be frightened into a straight line. He would probably organize rain if clouds respected titles." The pup tilted its head. Speaking to it felt easier than speaking to Stellan. She knew he retained only sharp pieces after an uncontrolled separation. That did not make the animal a private diary, but loneliness made people careless. She rolled the ball between her palms. He does listen eventually, she admitted. He fixed the night rota last winter after I mentioned the younger maids were exhausted. He pretended Oren suggested it. The pup's tail began moving. He remembers names. He returns trays when he thinks no one is watching. He is kinder than his face permits. The tail struck a row of spoons. Metal clattered across the floor. Nellwyn grabbed the pup before it could celebrate. That was not a request for applause. The side door opened. Stellan stood there in shirt sleeves, one hand braced against the frame. He had awakened when distance pulled at their connection. The pup remained outside, so cold dulled his face. Nellwyn wondered how much he had heard directly. His expression provided no mercy. "You should be sleeping," she said. "My wolf stole a spoon." Nellwyn examined his grave expression. "A medical emergency." He crossed the hall. The pup went to him, but not before licking Nellwyn's wrist. Heat touched Stellan's ears. He sat on the edge of the table while she gathered spoons. "Did you call me kind?" Nellwyn nearly dropped one. "I called your face restrictive. I remember the word kind. Then your memory is selective." His attention remained fixed on her. "It appears to preserve important material." His voice held quiet amusement. She looked up and found his eyes on her, warmer than the candles. For 2 years, attraction had lived between them as a thing neither would feed. He was a king. She was a servant who preferred keeping her livelihood. Their brief kindnesses had been easy to dismiss while both remained careful. His wolf had no respect for careful distance. Nellwyn stood. "From now on, I shall discuss only weather with him. I hope you will not revise the original assessment." The statement was gentle, almost shy. It made her chest tighten more than a grand compliment could have done. The pup pushed the ball against Stellan's hand. He rolled it toward Nellwyn. She caught it beneath one shoe. "Go back to bed," she ordered. "Is that concern?" She gathered the final spoon. "It is professional fear that you will stamp another report with dinner seasoning." He offered his hand to the pup. "Another important assessment." The wolf touched his palm. Stellan focused on the waking connection they had practiced. The animal blurred, but the shadow ribbon flickered and broke. Full reunion failed. He remained calm. He lay on a bench, allowed sleep to take him, and tried again. This time the pup merged safely. Nellwyn covered him with a table linen that would horrify the head housekeeper. When Oren arrived, he examined the sleeping king and scattered spoons. "Do I want to know?" "No," Nellwyn replied. "But apparently he does." The next morning, Nellwyn resigned from private conversations with the wolf. She did not resign from her post. She presented Stellan with a list instead. The list waited beside his breakfast plate. Steam rose from oat porridge, and rain drew crooked lines down the windows. The pup had returned during the night, leaving the king warm enough to work. He read Nellwyn's rules while Oren pretended not to watch. The first rule forbade questions about anything she confided to the pup while believing herself alone. The second allowed her to leave night duty without punishment. The third required another trusted person nearby during intimate exercises. The fourth stated that accidental wolf memories could not be used to win arguments. Stellan rested one finger beside that line. "Have I done this?" "Not yet. I plan for weather before it falls." "You compared me to a locked door." Nellwyn tapped the fourth rule. "That was before the rule." Oren became deeply interested in pouring tea. Stellan signed the page. Then he did something Nellwyn had not expected. He removed her from night duty for the next evening without anger. "You should decide whether to continue," he told her. "The agreement was made before either of us understood what I might remember." No royal pressure hid beneath the words. That made them harder to dismiss. Nellwyn spent the day performing ordinary work. She checked guest room fires, corrected a linen count, and stopped 2 pages from using ceremonial shields as sleds. Nobody ordered her back to the secure room. At supper, another attendant carried the pup past the servants' hall. It twisted in his arms, searching every face. Nellwyn kept eating. At midnight, she opened her door and found the wolf asleep against the threshold. It had not scratched, barked, or tried to enter. Oren sat on a stool at the far end of the corridor, keeping watch. "The king instructed me not to persuade you," he said. "Is he awake?" Oren glanced toward the royal rooms. "Yes, he can feel the distance, but he has not come here." Nellwyn crouched. The pup woke and lifted its head. It did not leap at her. It waited. That patience belonged to Stellan, too. She had seen the king restrain anger, hunger, pain, and affection. Until now, she had not known whether he could restrain power for someone else's comfort. Nellwyn sat beside the pup. The stone floor pressed cold through her nightrobe. She rubbed its ears, and somewhere beyond the corridor, Stellan probably felt the touch. "I will continue," she told Oren, "with the rules." The beta nodded. He expected nothing else and hoped for exactly that. That sentence contradicts itself. "Welcome to royal service." The following morning, Nellwyn met Stellan in the small library. He stood when she entered, which kings did not usually do for maids. "Thank you for honoring the distance," she said. "Thank you for returning by choice." The words settled between them. There was no joke for several heartbeats. Then the pup emerged from behind Stellan's chair, carrying the rules page. It had chewed only the corner containing his signature. Nellwyn retrieved it. "Your wolf objects to written boundaries." "My wolf cannot read." That defense has helped several nobles. Stellan laughed once, low and surprised. Nellwyn smiled back. They revised the night schedule together. She would remain during controlled exercises and emergencies. Oren or Cedron would be nearby. Stellan would ask before discussing any memory received through the wolf. When they finished, the king held out the pen. "Anything else?" Nellwyn considered him. "Yes, requests must sound like requests." His gaze did not leave hers. "Will you stay for today's exercise?" "I will." The pup wagged its tail beneath the table. Stellan's mouth curved as though the answer pleased both halves equally. The fourth-day luncheon was supposed to repair the summit's dignity. It failed when a northern baron described Rosewen Pike as an ideal item for the royal household. The dining gallery had been polished until every brass lamp shone. Musicians played near the windows. Roast pears, spiced duck, and warm bread scented the air. Nellwyn stood along the service wall with the pup in her arms. The baron praised Rosewen's family, health, and presumed willingness to marry Stellan. Rosewen set down her glass. "I came to negotiate a grain road. I did not realize I had been placed on the marriage menu." Several guests choked politely. Stellan told the baron that no courtship existed. Rosewen thanked him, then made the situation worse for entertainment. She invited the king to open the dancing. He could not refuse without appearing rude after defending her independence. They stepped onto the floor as the musicians changed rhythm. Stellan danced with formal precision. Rosewen talked while they turned, her expression pleasant enough to deceive the room. His gaze crossed the gallery once, then again. The third time, he found Nellwyn watching him over the pup's ears. She had no claim on his attention. They had not kissed, confessed, or promised anything. That sensible fact did not prevent a small ache beneath her ribs. Roswyn was clever, beautiful, and dressed in blue velvet. Nellwyn wore a brown work dress with a gravy spot near one cuff. The pup sensed her discomfort. It wriggled free, landed on the floor, and ran into the dance. It sat squarely on Stellan's boot. The king stopped before stepping on himself. Roswyn stopped with him. The musicians lost the beat one instrument at a time. Nellwyn hurried forward. "I apologize. He has no respect for choreography." "He has excellent timing," Roswyn replied. The envoy lifted the pup and handed it to Nellwyn. Then she looked at Stellan. "Your wolf has selected the person you watched through half our dance. I suggest you finish with her." Every eye in the gallery moved toward Nellwyn. Heat climbed her throat. Being desired privately was dangerous enough. Becoming a court spectacle in work clothes felt worse. Stellan saw the hesitation. He did not order her onto the floor. He crossed to her and lowered his voice. Would you like to dance? You may say no. Nellwyn looked at the watching nobles. Then she looked at the man who had stood when she entered a library that morning. Only the remaining half, she said. I charge extra for complete dances. Oren took the pup. It immediately tried to climb his formal coat. Stellan offered his hand. Nellwyn placed hers in it. The music resumed. He guided without pulling. She knew common dances, but not this court pattern, so he warned her before each turn. The hall smelled of candle wax and sweet pears. His palm was warm now, and the improvement made her strangely happy. You watched me 3 times, she murmured. Roswyn counted too? Nellwyn followed his next careful turn. She announced it to the room. Then denial would lack dignity. His hand steadied her at the waist. Has that stopped you before? His thumb shifted lightly against her glove. I was checking whether my wolf remained calm. Nellwyn glanced at the pup chewing Oren's button. Your wolf was calmer than you. Stellan's eyes held hers. That is possible. The admission turned the joke into something warmer. When the music ended, he released her hand slowly. Nobody applauded at first. Kit solved that by clapping too loudly. The rest of the room followed. The Baron who had started the trouble looked confused. Roswyn looked satisfied. Oren was missing one button. The servants understood that the dance carried social weight. Marta asked whether Nellwyn had been allowed to refuse. Learning that Stellan had asked quietly and waited mattered more than the court's applause. Roswyn returned to grain negotiations and discouraged further marriage talk. Stellan did not hide Nellwyn afterward or call the dance an accident. His consistency made the gesture feel like respect rather than impulse. Nellwyn returned to the service wall, but nothing felt quite as distant as before. The king lost his temper over a pitcher. It happened on the 5th morning. A young page named Emmerich brought water into the council room and stumbled over a raised rug. The pitcher hit the floor. It did not break, but water spread beneath 3 treaty maps. Stellan had slept badly. The wolf remained restless inside him, and Caldus had spent an hour questioning patrol strength. The king's sharp rebuke cut through the room. Emmerich froze. Nellwyn saw the boy's face empty with fear. She also saw Stellan recognize what he had done. The council paused while servants rescued the maps. Stellan could have continued. Kings often treated regret as something other people should manage. Instead, he dismissed the room for 10 minutes. In the antechamber, he asked Oren to send Emmerich compensation for the soaked uniform. Nellwyn, carrying towels, stopped beside him. Compensation is not an apology. Stellan's jaw tightened. I know. Then why send Oren? The beta moved one step backward. He had learned to leave space around dangerous truths. Stellan looked toward the council door. His father had never apologized to a servant. He had replaced people instead. The old habit stood behind Stellan like a second crown. He went back into the room. Emmerich knelt beside the maps. Stellan asked him to stand. Before the gathered delegates, the king admitted that the pitcher had been an accident and his response had been unfair. He apologized without adding an excuse. The page looked more shocked by the apology than the anger. From beneath a side table came a small scraping sound. The pup had emerged during Stellan's brief, exhausted doze in the antechamber. It trotted toward Emmerich with a cream cake in its mouth and placed the crushed offering on his shoe. Everyone stared. Emmerich began to smile. Stellan pointed at the cake. That is not part of my apology. The pup sat proudly beside it. Nellwyn folded the wet towels. Your wolf may be better at this than you. My wolf stole that from the refreshment table. Resourceful and emotionally available. Caldus made a noise suspiciously like laughter. Even Lady Isabet's stern mouth softened. Emmerich accepted the apology, the uniform replacement, and the least damaged half of the cake. After the meeting, Stellan found Nellwyn in the map room. Rain had stopped, leaving the windows bright. She hung damp documents across a line while the pup slept in a basket. You were right, he said. She turned. Please repeat that more slowly. The building may record it. Do not make me withdraw it. He helped clip a map to the line. The ordinary task placed him close enough that his shoulder brushed hers. I spent years believing authority weakened when it bent, he continued. Today, the room became calmer after I apologized. Most people prefer leaders who notice when they have stepped on them. Stellan clipped another corner into place. Will you continue advising the half that struggles with people? The question carried a quiet flirtation. She recognized it because his eyes did not move toward the pup. My fee remains high, she warned. I am told the royal household has several scarves. Nellwyn turned toward him. Your wolf already negotiated that rate. Stellan leaned closer by the smallest amount. Then I may need different terms. Nellwyn's pulse lifted. Submit them in writing. The pup woke and sneezed cream onto a corner of the western map. Stellan pinched the bridge of his nose. It objects to paperwork, a second useful political opinion. That evening, Stellan asked Nellwyn for an embrace. It took him almost an hour to reach the question. The waking exercise began after sunset in the quiet training room. Cedrin watched from a chair. Oren guarded the door. Nellwyn held the leather ball, though the pup had stopped chasing it after 3 rolls. The connected manifestation stood beside Stellan. A dark ribbon joined their shadows. This time the little wolf appeared without leaving him cold. It walked to Nellwyn and rested against her legs. She crouched, waiting for Stellan's permission before touching it. He nodded. Her fingers entered the thick black fur. Through the connection, his breath changed. The pup leaned harder against her knee. It wants to be held, Stellan said. I noticed. Stellan watched the small body lean against her. That is not the difficult part. Cedrin looked toward the window. Oren studied the door hinges. Both men had suddenly discovered urgent interests. Stellan's face held the strain of somebody approaching an unguarded border. I want it too. Nellwyn's hands stilled. His father had punished the young wolf for climbing into a nurse's lap after nightmares. At 12, Stellan learned to stand alone during fevers. At 31, asking for comfort still felt more dangerous than commanding soldiers. He did not send the pup to make the request. He let it return through the shadow first. The small body dissolved. Stellan remained before her in human form. Would you hold me? He asked. Nellwyn rose. Humor kept emotion from becoming too sharp. Is this part of the Winter Accord? No. Nellwyn let the question linger. A royal medical command? No. His hands remained open at his sides. Then yes. She stepped into his arms. For 1 second, Stellan held himself rigid. Then his hands settled across her back. His breath warmed her hair. Cedar, clean wool, and the wild winter scent of his wolf surrounded her. He was taller than she had imagined during every moment she had carefully avoided imagining this. His embrace tightened. Inside his shadow, the outline of a small tail moved once. It did not separate. The wolf remained connected and calm. Nellwyn rested her cheek against his chest. His heartbeat slowed beneath her ear. Your wolf appears satisfied, he murmured. She smiled against his shirt. The king is holding tighter. The king has waited longer. That confession traveled through her like warmth from strong wine. She leaned back enough to see his face. How long? Stellan's eyes moved over hers. You corrected my guest list 18 months ago. Nellwyn remembered the feuding widows. You noticed me before that. You threatened a coal bucket in my bedchamber. It had attacked my foot. Amusement warmed his golden eyes. Your argument was persuasive. Their smiles faded into a charged quiet. His gaze dropped briefly to her mouth, then returned to her eyes. He did not close the remaining distance. Nellwyn appreciated the restraint, though part of her found it irritating. Cedrin cleared his throat from across the room. The connection is stable. Oren added, the observers remain tragically present. Nellwyn stepped back. Stellan's hands lingered at her waist before releasing her. They tried one final exercise. Cedrin asked Stellan to call the connected pup and then invite it home without sleeping. The animal appeared, circled once, and touched his palm, its outline blurred. For several seconds, it resisted the old rule requiring a sleeping body. Then one paw dissolved into the shadow. The effort failed before full reunion. The pup became solid again, but Stellan did not force it. "Closer," Cedron said. "You offered, it listened." The king lay on the padded bench and allowed himself to sleep. The pup merged in the familiar way. When he woke, Nellwyn handed him the leather ball. "For practice," she said. Stellan slipped it into his pocket. "I thought you might charge a different fee. Your written proposal has not arrived." He leaned near enough that only she heard him. "I may deliver it personally." Her face warmed. Oren entered with excellent timing and an expression of deep regret. On the 6th morning, Stellan broke his new schedule for what he called an unavoidable reason. The reason was 3 meetings wearing one large coat. Storm reports had arrived from the high forest. The western grain figures still needed correction. A coastal envoy objected to the number of patrol horses assigned near his salt road. Stellan moved his rest period twice, then removed it. Nellwyn discovered this when she entered his office with the pup's meal and found no pup. The wolf remained inside him. That should have been reassuring. Instead, Stellan was standing over a map with both hands braced on the desk. His coffee had gone cold. Ink marked one cuff, and he had written Lady Isabet's name beside the western horse count. "Private restoration period," Nellwyn said. "Delayed." She pointed at the missing block on his schedule. "It has been delayed into non-existence." Oren stood near the bookcase, visibly losing an argument with loyalty. "I informed him of the risk." "I heard him," Stellan replied. Nellwyn set down the bowl. Hearing is the part before listening. He looked at her, tired enough to lack a sharp reply. She wanted to push harder. A knock announced the closed council, and 5 territory representatives entered before she could. Stellan asked her to remain in the antechamber in case his wolf emerged. Then he walked into the meeting, carrying his crown and his bad decision. For the first half hour, nothing happened. Voices moved behind the heavy doors. Paper rustled, chairs scraped. Nellwyn folded clean cloths simply to give her hands a task. The air smelled of sealing wax, rain-damp wool, and the lemon oil used on the council table. Then the voices stopped. Oren pushed the council door inward. The king sat at the head of the table with his eyes closed. His chin had dropped toward his chest. He had fallen asleep while Caldus read a revised number. A small black shape climbed out of the shadow beneath his chair. The pup stretched in full view of every leader. It yawned, shook one rear paw, and trotted toward the open door. Stellan woke as it passed him. Human King and Black Wolf remained visible on opposite sides of the room. No careful statement could make the condition look minor now. Caldus rose. His chair struck the wall. "Can you shift at all?" Stellan tried to stand. Cold weakness moved through him, but he kept his voice level. "Not while my wolf is separated." The pup reached Nellwyn and sat on her shoes. Several foreign guards stared at her as though she had collected the king's soul through excellent housekeeping. Lady Isabet stopped the first wave of questions. She did not protect Stellan from facts. She protected the room from becoming foolish. The pup found a loose thread on Caldus's boot and began pulling it. "Your Majesty," Caldus said, attempting to ignore the attack, "tomorrow's moon run requires an adult form. I am aware." The thread came free. One side of the boot loosened. Caldus looked down. "Must it do that now?" Nellwyn picked up the pup. "It has strong views about Western footwear. They are not binding." Even Isabet's mouth twitched. The humor passed quickly. Caldus argued that the territories needed a plan if Stellan could not lead winter patrols in wolf form. He did not demand the throne. He asked who would coordinate during emergencies and whether the accord should be delayed. Those were reasonable questions. Stellan hated them more because they were reasonable. He declared that he would finish the day's sessions and provide an answer before the final ceremony. Then he opened the wrong folder. He called the coastal representative by the High Forest delegate's name. He corrected himself, turned a page, and repeated the same error 10 minutes later. Nellwyn watched his authority begin to fray. The room did not need a flawless wolf. It needed a king who knew when his mind had stopped serving the work. The pup pressed its face against her arm. Through their connection, Stellan felt the warmth. His gaze found hers. She did not speak across the council table. She simply glanced toward Oren. Stellan understood. He closed the folder. The sound was quiet, yet every conversation ended. I ignored the recovery schedule agreed upon by my advisors, he said. That decision worsened the separation. I will not compound it by pretending this meeting remains useful. He gave the afternoon agenda to Wisabet, Caldus, and Roswen. Oren would act for the crown on patrol details. Stellan would review their decisions after resting. Caldus looked surprised. Isabet looked satisfied. The meeting ended without the roof falling. In the private corridor, Stellan leaned against the cold stone. Nellwyn carried the pup beside him. He did not ask for it. He looked too ashamed. You were right, he said. Again? We should choose a holiday. Stellan leaned against the cold wall. I endangered the summit to avoid appearing weak. Yes, then you stopped. Both facts belong to you. He looked at the pup in her arms. Does it still prefer you? Nellwyn understood the question beneath the question. At the moment, I am warmer and carrying meat. Improve your offer. Stellan extended one arm. The pup moved to him willingly and tucked its nose beneath his jaw. Better, she said. His tired smile returned. I had expert advice. The lantern gathering began at dusk because canceling it would have created more panic than holding it. Hundreds of guests filled the lower court. Lamps swung from ropes above food stalls. Musicians played near the fountain, and children chased paper stars between cloaks. The air grew thick with lamp oil, cinnamon cakes, smoke, wet stone, and the layered scents of visiting wolves. Stellan rested through the first hour. His wolf returned safely while he slept, and a healer confirmed that his pulse had steadied. He remained inside with Oren to prepare the next day's statement. Nellwyn supervised the pup's secure room after it emerged during a later nap. Kit sat outside the barrier, rolling the leather ball through the open lower gap. No wandering, Nellwyn warned him. I am sitting. Kit rolled the ball beneath the gate. That warning was for both of you. The pup caught the ball and returned it. Kit's green ceremonial ribbon, recovered after the first day, fluttered from his shoulder. A maid summoned Nellwyn to solve a spilled cider dispute 20 paces away. She closed the room's inner gate and left an attendant at the door. The mistake was small. The outer service door had been propped open by lantern workers. A gust swept through the passage and tore Kit's ribbon loose. It flew across the court like a green bird. Kit chased it. The attendant saw him enter the crowd but could not abandon the royal wolf. Then the pup squeezed beneath a decorative screen, followed Kit's scent, and vanished too. By the time Nellwyn returned, the secure room contained one leather ball and an attendant near tears. She did not shout. Shouting would not reverse time. She asked 3 questions. Which way had the boy gone? How long ago? What had the pup been following? The answer led toward the old winter conservatory beyond the West Lantern Walk. That building had been closed for repairs. Its service gate should have been locked. It was not. Nellwyn found the green ribbon caught on a nail inside the gate. Small, muddy prints continued into the overgrown garden behind it. A storm-drained channel disappeared beneath the ruined glass house. Then the wind knocked a tall lantern frame sideways. The frame struck the rotten gatepost. Old timber and loose stone collapsed across the opening. Guests screamed and surged away. Smoke spilled from broken lamps, adding burnt oil to the confusion. Nellwyn climbed onto the fallen wood. She could not see Kit or the pup beyond the dark garden. Music still thundered from the far court. The first celebration rockets cracked above the roofs. Any call from below would vanish beneath the noise. She sent the attendant for Oren and ordered nearby servants to stop anyone entering the unstable passage. Stellan arrived without his crown. He had felt fear move through his wolf, followed by cold distance. His face had lost color. Where? He asked. Nellwyn showed him the ribbon and prints. Inside the old drainage garden, the gate collapsed after they entered. He closed his eyes, searching the bond. Hundreds of wolves crowded the court. Spice, smoke, rain, lamp oil, and running water split every scent. Underground channels carried echoes in several directions. "I cannot locate him," Stellan admitted. The words hurt him more than the cold. Orin arrived with guards. Stellan ordered a quiet search through service tunnels. He wanted to keep the festival moving and prevent foreign delegations from learning how little he could sense. Nellwyn caught his sleeve before he turned. "Kit is missing too." "I know." Nellwyn held up the boy's ribbon. "Then this is no longer your private embarrassment. 5 territories have people who can search." His gaze hardened with fear. "If I announce that my wolf is lost, the accord may fail. If Lady Yesabet learns you hid her missing grandson to protect your image, it should fail." The truth struck cleanly. Around them, lanterns swayed. A cook attempted to redirect children from the blocked gate by offering free cakes. 2 musicians continued playing because nobody had told them to stop. Orin waited without interfering. Stellan looked toward the celebration platform. His entire life had trained him to conceal a wound until he could stand alone. Inside the darkness, his wolf was frightened. A child was depending on it. He removed his hand from Nellwyn's grip only to take hers briefly. "Come with me," he said. That sounded like an order. Despite the crisis, his mouth moved. "Will you come with me?" "Yes." They crossed the crowded court together. The music stopped when Stellan climbed onto the lantern platform. He did not wait for a herald. His alpha voice carried over the lower court, steady enough to quiet frightened guests without pushing them to their knees. He told them that Kit Caldermere and the black pup were missing inside the old drainage garden. Then he stated what the pup truly was. It was his wolf soul, separated during sleep after weeks of exhaustion. It remained physically connected to him, but he could not locate it through the smoke, crowd, and old water channels. He needed help. The final sentence changed the court more than the confession. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Lady Isabet stepped forward first. Worry sharpened her scent, but she did not waste time condemning him. She assigned her eastern trackers to the upper garden wall. Caldus gathered the strongest western wolves to clear the fallen timbers. Rosewen ordered the southern attendants to guide guests away and account for every child. The coastal party knew water channels, while the high forest delegation carried rope and climbing tools. Orin divided the grounds into sections. Within minutes, 5 suspicious territories became one search party. Stellan remained at the central map table. Every instinct urged him to tear through the garden himself. That would satisfy fear and accomplish little. He was weak without the wolf, unfamiliar with the buried drains, and responsible for coordinating more than 80 searchers. Nellwyn stood beside him. She knew Kit climbed whenever worried and hated deep water. The pup disliked running streams, but would follow the boy into danger. Those habits ruled out 2 flooded channels and made the raised conservatory path more likely. Stellan marked the route. A guard brought a scent cloth belonging to Kit. The eastern wolves followed it until smoke swallowed the trail near 3 drain entrances. A coastal searcher heard scratching below the greenhouse, but could not identify which channel carried the sound. Fireworks cracked overhead again. Orin sent someone to halt the remaining display. "The celebration committee objects," he reported. Stellan stared at him. "I informed them the king's soul outranks rockets." Nellwyn almost laughed. The sound came out as a nervous breath. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Cold settled through Stellan's coat. His connection produced flashes rather than directions. Wet earth, Kit's frightened breathing, the smell of old wood, and pain in one front paw that had not yet become an injury. Reports returned from every route. The eastern trackers found Kit's scent near the broken conservatory, then lost it where 3 channels crossed. Running water carried one trail east, while smoke pushed another toward the wall. The coastal wolves discovered that an old maintenance map had been drawn before a later collapse changed the drains. Orin replaced the useless map with a sheet of blank paper. Searchers marked each opening as they confirmed it. Nellwyn added the narrow laundry culvert that palace plans ignored because servants had used it unofficially for decades. The high forest climbers reached the glasshouse roof. From above, they saw the green ribbon for one hopeful moment. It proved to be a strip of moss shining beneath a lamp. Nobody turned the mistake into blame. They marked the location and moved on. Stellan listened to every failed report. He did not punish messengers for arriving without a child. That restraint kept information moving. Guards who feared anger often delayed bad news, and delayed news killed people in winter. Nellwyn watched him become more effective as his performance of invulnerability fell away. He admitted when a sensation was unclear. He separated what he knew from what he feared. When two groups nearly entered the same unstable channel from opposite sides, he stopped one before their combined weight brought down the roof. The work was leadership without a dramatic pose. It involved names, routes, repeated counts, and the patience to remain where all messages could reach him. His wolf might have been the brave creature beside Kit, but the human half was protecting the entire search. That realization settled something inside Nellwyn. Her affection was not based only on the tenderness exposed by the pup. She loved the man who could correct himself while frightened and keep other people useful instead of turning them into an audience. He gripped the map edge. Nellwyn covered his hand. "Tell me what changes." "He is near moving water. Not in it. There is glass or metal above him." She pictured the old conservatory. Its roof had collapsed years ago, but sections of iron frame remained. A raised walkway crossed the largest drain beside the potting wall. She pointed to the western section. "There." The first team had found that passage blocked by roots. Caldus offered to clear it, yet the work would take time. Stellan issued 3 orders. Western wolves would cut the roots. Coastal searchers would approach through the lower drain. High forest climbers would cross the wall from above. He did not run ahead. He kept every team aware of the others so nobody caused a second collapse. Lady Isabet watched him while waiting for news. Her fear for Kit remained visible. "You should have told us earlier," she said. "Yes." No defense followed. She studied him. "Good. We will discuss that after my grandson is safe. You may choose the length of the discussion. Do not offer reckless concessions while frightened." Nellwyn murmured. "That appears to be a family skill among alphas." Isabet heard her. To Nellwyn's surprise, the older woman nodded. A runner arrived from the greenhouse. The climbers had found one of Kit's boot prints on the raised wall. They also found black fur caught on a splinter. Stellan felt a sudden sting across his palm. Blood opened beneath his glove. Nellwyn seized his wrist. The cut was shallow but fresh, matching the place a front paw would strike broken stone. The wolf was hurt. Pain sharpened their bond. Stellan focused inward and turned slowly, feeling for the pull rather than fighting it. The sensation strengthened toward the potting wall, then dipped below ground. "Third lower channel," he said, "behind the Warmhouse Foundation." Orin sent the location to every team. They reached the blocked side passage minutes later. Caldus and 2 guards lifted a fallen beam while coastal workers cleared stones below it. Damp air breathed through the gap, carrying Kit's scent. From the darkness came one small bark. Stellan dropped to his knees. "I hear him," Nellwyn whispered. The bark came again, followed by a child's weak voice telling someone to stop licking his ear. Relief struck the group so hard that Caldus laughed aloud. "The prince is alive," a guard shouted. Orin corrected him automatically. "Not a prince. The king's detached emotional problem is alive." "Worse," Stellan said. "Return to prince until we finish." Even Lady Isabet laughed then, though tears stood in her eyes. The opening beneath the Warmhouse wall was too narrow for Stellan's shoulders. Nellwyn went through first, with a coastal searcher behind her. Wet stone caught at her skirt. The passage smelled of mud, rust, and extinguished lamps. Water rushed somewhere below the floor. They found Kit beneath the remains of a potting bench. A fallen beam had trapped one side of his cloak without crushing him. Broken glass glittered several feet away. The pup stood between Kit and the sharp debris, one front paw bleeding from a shallow cut. Kit's face was dirty and wet with tears. He still held the green ribbon. "I found it," he told Nellwyn. "An achievement that will impress your grandmother after she finishes terrifying you." The boy nodded as though this seemed fair. The searcher raised the beam while Nellwyn freed the cloth. Kit could stand. His ankle hurt, but it carried weight. She sent him toward the opening before touching the pup. It remained braced until the child was clear. Only then did its legs shake. Nellwyn wrapped it in her red scarf. The same scarf it had chosen for her on the second day now covered its muddy body. It licked her wrist once and looked toward the passage. Stellan waited beyond it. Kit emerged to Isabete's arms. The older Alpha held him with one hand and examined every limb with the other. She thanked the searchers before delivering a quiet promise concerning locked gates and the remainder of his childhood. Nellwyn climbed out carrying the wolf. Stellan reached for it, then stopped. He looked at her first. "Are you hurt?" "Only my skirt and my patience." Relief crossed his face. He took the pup. Its injured paw matched the line of blood across his human palm. The cut was not deep, but the shared pain had guided him to the correct channel. Around them, leaders, guards, servants, and guests watched. Stellan could have carried the wolf behind closed doors before saying more. Instead, he knelt in the mud. "I spent years treating you as a part of myself that required discipline," he told the pup. "You protected someone when I could not reach him. I was wrong to confuse silence with strength." The pup touched its nose to his cut hand. Nellwyn felt the crowd become still. This was not a performance designed by heralds. The king's coat was muddy, his hair had fallen over his forehead, and his missing soul was wrapped in a servant's red scarf. He had never looked more complete. Stellan invited the wolf home. The animal's outlines softened. For an instant, nothing else happened. The old pattern pulled toward sleep, the only route they had completed successfully after a full separation. Stellan kept his eyes open. He did not force the wolf. He remembered the leather ball, the absurd ears, the first voluntary embrace, and the connected shadow returning through his palm. He offered the waking path they had practiced. Darkness joined their shadows across the mud. One injured paw dissolved into the connection. Then the second followed. The pup's body became warm smoke beneath his hands and flowed into his chest. Stellan gasped. Golden light flashed behind his eyes. Heat returned beneath his skin. A huge adult wolf shadow rose behind him, broad-shouldered and whole, before settling into his human outline. The complete waking reunion had succeeded for the first time. It did not erase exhaustion or heal a lifetime in one breath. It proved that the wolf no longer needed sleep to find an open door. Orin exhaled as though he had been holding the entire summit inside his lungs. Caldus folded his arms. "Can you become the adult wolf?" Stellan stood carefully. "Not tonight." The answer caused murmurs. He continued before pride could change it. A healer would examine the shared injury. He would sleep. If cleared, he would attempt one controlled shift before the moon run. If the attempt failed or caused pain, the ceremony would be postponed. "That is sensible," Isabet said. Caldus looked at the rescued child, the organized teams, and the king who had asked for help. "It is irritatingly sensible." The tension loosened. Kit limped over while his grandmother held his arm. He looked at Stellan's chest. "Is the pup gone?" "He is home," Stellan answered. Kit studied the king's chest. "Can he come out again?" "Not tonight." Kit considered this. "Can I still call him a prince?" Orin began to object. Stellan stopped him. "Only in private." "That is how the first rumor began," Nellwyn reminded him. The king looked toward her. His expression softened with open gratitude and something deeper. "Then I have learned nothing. You learned to ask for help. We should not expect two miracles in one evening." Laughter moved through the gathered court. It did not diminish what had happened. It allowed everyone to breathe around it. Later, after the healer cleaned their matching cuts, Stellan found Nellwyn outside the infirmary. The corridor smelled of herbs, damp wool, and smoke fading from the court. He took her uninjured hand. "You made me tell them," he said. "I reminded you that a child mattered more than your pride. You chose the platform." His fingers tightened gently around hers. "You came into the passage first. My shoulders fit. Heroism often depends on architecture." His thumb moved across her knuckles. "I was afraid for you. I noticed. You asked whether I was hurt before checking whether your soul still had 4 legs. It already had an attendant." Nellwyn lifted one eyebrow. "And I do not?" Stellan stepped closer. "You have a king attempting to apply for the position." Her pulse jumped. "The wages are terrible. I can offer scarves. Stolen scarves." He moved a fraction closer. "And a personal delivery of revised terms." The memory of his earlier promise warmed the narrow space between them. His attention lingered on her lips. This time, no observer stood inside the training room, yet the infirmary door opened before either moved. Oren emerged holding 2 medical instructions and 1 expression of perfect exhaustion. "The king is ordered to sleep," he announced. Nellwyn smiled at Stellan. "Your application has been delayed." "Not withdrawn," he said. He lifted her hand and brushed his lips across her knuckles before obeying the healer. The touch remained after he disappeared down the corridor. The 7th morning began with 3 healers, 4 opinions, and 1 king attempting to put on his boots too early. Nellwyn entered the infirmary as Stellan reached for the 2nd boot. The shared cut across his palm had closed to a thin red line. His wolf's restored healing had worked through the night, but stiffness remained. "Sit," she told him. "I have been examined." Nellwyn looked pointedly at his bare foot. "You are wearing 1 boot. That is not a medical victory." Stellan sat. Oren handed her the written instructions. The healers permitted 1 controlled shift in the afternoon. If the injury reopened, if the wolf form appeared incomplete, or if dizziness returned, the moon run would be postponed. The king had agreed to every condition. Nellwyn checked the document for hidden royal revisions. "You distrust me," he observed. "I trust you to become foolish when dignity is nearby." Stellan accepted the written instructions. A specialized form of trust, earned through extensive evidence. His smile arrived without resistance. They ate breakfast in a small room overlooking the white roofs. Stellan finished everything on his plate under 3 sets of supervision. Oren left for the final treaty session while Nellwyn remained with the king. Without the pup between them, the room felt different. The wolf was present inside Stellan, warm and wakeful. Nellwyn could no longer hide affection inside animal care. Stellan placed his cup down. "I meant what I said outside the infirmary. You offered stolen scarves and poor wages. The part before that." He wanted to care for her. The seriousness beneath the flirtation made her chest tighten. Nellwyn reminded him that gratitude could resemble love during a crisis. He had been frightened, injured, and reunited with his wolf. She would not let either of them mistake relief for a permanent promise. "I noticed you before the crisis," he said. "I noticed you for 18 months. You mostly looked past me." He shook his head once. "I was trying not to look." That answer pleased her more than it should have. He did not press for a declaration. Instead, they discussed the evening. Stellan planned to explain the condition before the moon run. If he failed to shift, he would not treat the failure as shame. The accord might be delayed, but he would continue treatment. He also intended to speak publicly about Nellwyn. She immediately objected to being called the woman who healed him. "You did not heal me," he agreed. "You made hiding less comfortable than honesty." That sounds accurate and unromantic. Stellan leaned back in his chair. "I can improve the second part. Submit it in writing." His mouth curved. "You have delayed my application twice." She leaned across the table. A king should respect thorough hiring practices. His gaze dropped to her mouth. Does the position include an interview? Heat rose in her face. Before she answered, Orin returned with a stack of papers. I sensed optimism, the beta said. I came to prevent it. The treaty required 2 final signatures. Caldus had also offered to postpone the ceremonial run without penalty. His offer proved that the summit's hardest skeptic no longer viewed caution as cowardice. Stellan signed the papers with an ordinary pen. Nobody allowed him near the salt. That afternoon, the controlled shift took place in the old exercise court. Cedrin, the healers, Orin, and Nellwyn watched. Stellan invited the wolf forward. Black fur moved over his skin. His body changed with a low rush of displaced air. For 3 breaths, his shape blurred between man and wolf. Then an enormous black wolf stood on the sand. The right ear carried its familiar notch. Golden eyes found Nellwyn immediately. He took 1 careful step. Then another. The injured paw held his weight. No wound opened. Nellwyn's relief became a laugh when the great wolf noticed the leather ball beside Cedrin's chair. The king regarded the ball. The ball looked harmless. His tail moved once. Orin turned away too late. The Alpha King of the North picked up the ball, carried it to Nellwyn, and placed it at her feet. She rubbed the thick fur beneath his jaw. Good boy. The adult wolf closed his eyes with visible pleasure. Cedrin declared the shift stable. He also declared that dignity had survived worse things than playing fetch. Stellan returned to human form behind a privacy screen. When he emerged, his face was composed. No one discusses the ball, he said. Nellwyn picked it up. What ball? His eyes warmed. You are learning royal discretion. The full moon rose over the palace woods like a bright coin nobody could spend. 5 territory leaders gathered at the edge of the short forest path. Their attendants waited beside lanterns. The moon run was not a race or a magical trial. It was a promise made in visible form. No territory would leave the others alone during winter. Stellan stood before them in a plain black coat. He explained his condition without hiding behind Cedrin's age or Nellwyn's care. 6 weeks of refusing rest had weakened the bond. Years of denying ordinary wolf instincts had shaped the separated form. The pup was not an heir, spell, or independent creature. He accepted responsibility for concealing the severity after learning the truth. Then he described what had changed. He had slept, delegated work, practiced conscious connection, and called the fully separated wolf home while awake. One successful shift did not mean the problem was finished. Recovery would continue after the summit. Nobody applauded. The honesty did not need decoration. Lady Isabet signed the final accord page first. Her grandson stood beside her on a wrapped ankle, under orders not to chase anything until spring. Caldus signed next. I expected the North to be led by an adult wolf. Stellan met his eyes. It is. I was speaking about your behavior. Nellwyn heard Roswen choke on a laugh. Caldus's severe expression broke. He added that the search had shown more leadership than any ceremonial sprint. If Stellan stopped from pain, the accord would still stand. The last signatures followed. Nellwyn waited near the lanterns in her best brown dress. The red scarf covered her shoulders. Stellan looked at her before removing his coat. For a brief moment, a connected pup appeared beside him. Its paws remained joined to his shadow. There was no panic now. The little wolf walked around Stellan once, then came to Nellwyn. She knelt and touched the notched ear. No secret engagements tonight, she whispered. It licked her chin. Warmth flashed across Stellan's ears in human form. Several delegates noticed. Roswen smiled without mercy. Stellan held one hand toward the pup. It returned willingly, flowing along the dark connection into his chest. The change began. His shoulders broadened. Black fur swallowed the moonlight. Paws struck the earth where boots had stood. The adult wolf rose until Nellwyn's head would barely reach its shoulder. Its coat shone blue-black beneath the moon. Gold eyes held the same intelligence as the man's. The old notch in the right ear completed the proof. Around him, the other leaders shifted. Isabet became a lean silver wolf. Caldus took a heavy brown form. 3 more shapes gathered at the path. The run began at an easy pace. The first stretch passed beneath tall pines, where old snow softened every footfall. Stellan felt the adult wolf test its body. The form was familiar, but the experience had changed. He no longer rode its strength as though controlling a dangerous horse. He felt the cold air enter one set of lungs and the earth answer beneath 4 paws. Joy rose when the path opened. It carried the same bright impulse that had chased the leather ball. Stellan allowed it without breaking formation. His stride lengthened beside Caldus, then settled when Isabet chose a slower line over frozen roots. That adjustment fulfilled the ceremony better than speed could have done. The moon run represented shared winter duty. A leader who raced beyond everyone else would protect only his pride. At the frozen pond, the coastal wolf slipped on a skin of fresh ice. Stellan moved close enough to steady his shoulder. Caldus circled behind them while the high forest leader checked the safer edge. Nobody stopped, and nobody was left to recover alone. Nellwyn watched from the distant lantern line. 6 dark shapes moved across the white clearing, sometimes distinct and sometimes joined by shadow. She recognized Stellan by size, gold eyes, and the notched ear. She also recognized him by the way he now checked the others instead of measuring how far he could lead. The pup form had not been destroyed. Its openness remained inside the adult wolf, adding play and affection to power. When Stellan passed the lanterns on the final turn, his gaze found Nellwyn. His tail moved once before he could reconsider. Roswyn noticed. Orin noticed. Kit announced it to everyone within 30 feet. Nellwyn did not laugh at the wolf. She smiled so broadly that the cold hurt her cheeks. They crossed the pine track, circled the frozen pond, and returned beneath the palace lights. The distance was modest. Its meaning was not. Attendants cheered as 6 wolves entered the clearing together. Stellan changed behind the waiting screens. When he returned in human form, Orin handed him a coat and checked his palm. The wound remained closed. Kit approached with the leather ball behind his back. "Do not," Stellan warned. The boy looked innocent. "I have done nothing. You smell like leather and conspiracy." Kit surrendered the ball to Nellwyn. "He likes this." "I know," she said. Stellan faced the crowd. "The accord is renewed. The Northern Patrol Plan begins at first light under Orin's supervision." The beta nodded, then realized that last phrase meant the king would not personally attend every dawn briefing. "Did you just delegate tomorrow?" Orin asked. "I learn quickly." Orin considered the past week. It took a detached soul and 5 territories. Results matter. The laughter that followed held no cruelty. The leaders had watched their king lose control, admit error, and restore connection without pretending the weakness had never existed. Stellan turned toward Nellwyn. The political work was finished. What remained frightened him more. Stellan crossed the clearing instead of summoning Nellwyn to him. That choice mattered. Kings called people upward. Men approached the women they hoped would choose them. The gathering quieted as he stopped before her. Moonlight touched the red scarf his wolf had selected. Mud had been cleaned from its fringe, though one dark stain remained. Nellwyn felt every watching eye. She also felt the leather ball hidden behind her skirt because Kit had given it to her at the worst possible moment. Stellan thanked the territory leaders, searchers, healers, servants, and guards. Then he spoke about her. He did not call her his savior. He did not claim her touch had cured him. Nellwyn had recognized danger, demanded honest terms, protected a child, and refused to let a crown turn fear into secrecy. She had also informed the court that his wolf was better at apologizing. "That remains true," she said. Laughter moved across the clearing. Stellan smiled, and the last stiffness left the moment. He told them Nellwyn was not the pup's mother, keeper, or convenient treatment. She was a woman he had noticed long before the summit. He admired her judgment, humor, courage, and refusal to disappear when powerful people entered a room. Then he looked only at her. "I love you," he said. "I will not turn that into an order or a reward." Will you allow me to court you openly? The direct words struck deeper than a polished speech. Nellwyn had spent 2 years refusing to imagine this. During the past 7 days, she had seen his worst exhaustion, his embarrassed tenderness, and his effort to change. She knew one brave week did not guarantee an easy life. She also knew he had listened when she said no, stepped back when she needed distance, and asked for help when a child depended on him. Love had not appeared from nowhere during the summit. It had grown quietly through returned trays, corrected schedules, winter tea, and every moment they pretended not to notice. She stepped closer. "Do you love me?" she asked, "or have you confused attraction with free schedule management?" His eyes brightened. The schedule management is an extremely attractive additional quality. That answer is dangerously competent. I have received advice. Nellwyn glanced toward the beta. From Oren? The beta spoke from behind Stellan. I deny involvement. His romantic reports are never filed on time. Nellwyn laughed. Then she gave the answer everyone was waiting for. She loved him too. Stellan's control broke in the gentlest possible way. Relief warmed his face. The shadow at his feet produced the outline of a wagging tail. Nellwyn pointed down. Your wolf has announced it first. It has no respect for timing. It has been ahead of you all week. He offered one hand. May I kiss you? You may consider this the interview. Stellan drew her close. The first touch of his mouth was careful. Nellwyn curled one hand into the front of his coat and answered with less caution. His arm tightened around her waist. Cedar, cold air, and the warm, wild scent of his wolf filled her senses. The gathered court began to cheer. Kit shouted that the king was doing it incorrectly because nobody had thrown the ball. Isabet covered her grandson's mouth. Rosewen laughed hard enough to lean against Caldus. Oren stared at the moon as though asking it to finish the evening. Stellan ended the kiss slowly. His forehead rested against Nellwyn's. How was the interview? He murmured. Promising. The applicant needs further private assessment. His golden eyes darkened with interest. I am available immediately. The healer ordered you to rest. This feels restorative. She kissed him again before the king could misuse more medical language. When they separated, Oren stepped onto the low platform. The summit is concluded, he announced. The accord is signed, the king has recovered his wolf, and no secret prince exists. Anyone creating another engagement will be assigned to inventory the royal laundry. That threat emptied the remaining diplomats faster than an alarm bell. Stellan kept Nellwyn's hand in his as the clearing emptied. The private celebration could wait until neither of them had an audience. 3 weeks later, Nellwyn found the black pup in the royal sitting room. It sat beside the fire with one of Stellan's socks in its mouth. For half a second, fear stopped her. Then she saw the dark ribbon joining its paws to the shadow of the man standing beside the window. Stellan was awake, warm, and entirely too pleased with himself. The manifestation was controlled. Cedron had approved it after several stable shifts, and Stellan now slept 7 hours on most nights. Oren chaired 2 dawn meetings each week. The king continued training, sometimes with the leather ball hidden from important visitors. Nellwyn had accepted a temporary winter position coordinating the private wing staff. It came with fair wages and a formal assessment. Courtship remained separate from employment, leaving her free to tell the king when he was impossible. You used a medical exercise to steal laundry, Nellwyn said. I am practicing coordination. The pup ran to her with the sock. Your coordination has criminal intent. She lifted the little wolf. It settled against her chest with the same happy sigh it had given on the first day. Stellan's eyes narrowed. Still jealous? She asked. I am taller, house-trained, and capable of conversation. Nellwyn kissed the pup's forehead. Heat immediately touched the king's ears. This one is cuter. That is a temporary advantage. He held out his hand. The pup returned through the connected shadow, leaving the sock on the carpet. Stellan crossed the room until he stood close enough to replace the warm weight in her arms. Will you hold the taller one? he asked. The taller one must first return stolen property. Stellan picked up the sock. It had been washed and carefully mended. Nellwyn recognized it as the same one from the breakfast room. You kept that? Evidence. Nellwyn turned the mended sock over. Of what? He placed it in her hand. The morning you carried me into my own life and accused me of fatherhood. Nellwyn examined his solemn expression. That sentence is suspiciously polished. Did Oren write it? Oren refused to review my romantic correspondence. Then prove it is yours. Stellan drew her against him. His shadow formed two cheerful ears and a wagging tail across the wall. The taller version still wants to be held, he murmured. Nellwyn wrapped both arms around his neck. The taller version is demanding. Is that a refusal? It is an invitation to improve your argument. He kissed her until the sock fell forgotten between their feet. Nellwyn decided the evidence was convincing. Thank you for listening to Moonlit Romance Tales. I hope this story brought you a little laughter, warmth, and a peaceful moment in a world that can sometimes feel heavy. If you enjoyed this tale, please like, subscribe, and share it to spread more happiness. I'll see you in the next one.